Hello, welcome to the Learning Curve. I'm Marjorie Began, and my guest today is Bristol County District Attorney Tom Quinn. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you have had the position of District Attorney for the past year, is that correct?
That's correct. I was appointed by both Governor Patrick and Governor Baker approximately a year ago, and have served in that position since January of 2015. I have to run for election in September because it was a special appointment. I wasn't elected to the position.
I see. Now, your background for this position was what?
Well, I was a prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor about 17 years. I started out in Bristol County in the district court, and I was a prosecutor in the district court and Superior Court for about 8.5 years. I went out on my own, and then when District Attorney Sutter was elected in 2006, I came back as one of his top assistants. So for 8 years leading up to this appointment, I was overseeing the serious criminal cases in Superior Court in the office.
I see. What kind of cases does your office see?
Well, we're responsible for prosecuting criminal cases in Bristol County, 20 cities and towns. We see every types of case, from assault to theft to sexual assault, homicide, drug dealing, drug possession. The theft offenses take on different versions, so to speak: shoplifting, more complex stealing, motor vehicle violations, drunken driving. All cases of that nature we're responsible for prosecuting.
I see. There's one particular area that has become very important to you in your office, and that's elder abuse, whether it be physical or financial. Would you like to tell us about that?
Certainly. That is correct. Since I become DA after a few months, upon reflecting on what my priorities would be, it became clear that the elder abuse, in particular financial elder abuse, was rampant, and that we had to do something about it. Obviously, when you discuss elder abuse, there are several categories. One is physical, which is outrageous. Neglect. We've seen more and more horrendous cases of neglect. But the vast majority of the abuse is financial theft by, in many cases, sadly, loved ones or trusted people who are taking care of individuals. So I've made a priority of creating an elder abuse unit to investigate financial abuse, and I'm staffing it, have staffed it, and will continue to grow the unit because of the extraordinary volume of cases that are out there.
What kinds of things do you see? I mean, as far as people abusing financially?
Well, what we see would be people who have the authority to assist an elder with their financial affairs. And from that, we see abuse and outright theft. For example, someone having access to a bank account can write checks and without the authority of the person, and eventually take up to thousands of dollars worth of money. Some of it isn't criminal. We focus on criminal. We see individuals, again, who may have a power of attorney, who can attempt to manipulate the situation into really stealing the property of their relative, of their close friend. We see at times grandchildren who might abuse a situation and take money from their grandmother or grandfather. Many cases people are isolated. They're by themselves. They're easy to prey on. They have guilt. They love these people in many cases, so they may acquiesce to some financial manipulation. But when you have people with money who are vulnerable, and that's why I'm making it an issue, these people have lived their lives. They're in the latter part of their lives. We hope they live long lives, but they shouldn't have to be subject to financial abuse and ruin when they should be enjoying the fruits of their labor, which has been to contribute greatly to our communities by raising families, working, volunteering. and at the very end of their lives, or near the end of their lives, if you are going to be subject to theft from, sadly, family members in many cases.
I know there is that uh, discussion about an elderly person answers the phone and someone says, hi, Grandma, and they say, oh, is that you, Tommy? And it's like, yeah, it's Tommy, and the person just builds on it and builds on it and gets the person's trust, and then ends up saying, I need money, send me here and there. That's awful, absolutely.
It's awful. It's outright theft, preying on the emotions of someone. We've seen and heard of cases of that, people calling from Canada, either impersonating the grandchild or saying that the grandchild is in dire straits and needs money. And unfortunately, on occasion, the individual parts with the money because of their love and or concern for the situation. A big part of what I'm trying to do is prevention, though, and I have been going to intend to going to every council on aging in the county and address the groups there, and simply put, I say this: these phone scams, which that is, don't answer the phone. And if you answer the phone, hang it up, because you don't know anybody from Canada that's calling. You don't know anybody from Arizona. And that's how these things happen. Now, that's a little bit different because they're trying to use, say, the grandson, grandchild to manipulate them into giving up money. In fact, a good close friend of mine said, I was thinking of you the other day because that happened to a friend of his. And the $2,000 or $3,000 that's gone and never going to be returned. In that case, cannot be prosecuted because outside of the country and the proof would be difficult. But we have the outright theft in some cases from family members or caretakers, and then we have the scams. And what I'm doing with the scams, we've put a kiosk, if you will, in every council on aging in the district with information, helping them to avoid putting themselves in these situations, because I am prepared to prosecute cases that we can make cases on, but we don't want to get to that point. I don't want them taking the call and losing the $2,000. I don't want them receiving a bogus call from the IRS.
Exactly, the
saying,
IRS.
you're in trouble, you owe $3,000. The IRS scares people, but plain and simple, the IRS communicates one way, via the mail. So if you get a letter from the IRS says you owe money, then you can be concerned. But, and we've had that, I've mentioned that repeatedly. IRS doesn't communicate by phone, hang the phone up. I actually had my father calling me about that. IRS is calling him, he's all concerned. He could end up giving them money to fend them off. So I actually called him back after that and said, this is the IRS calling, and he followed directions and said the IRS does not communicate by phone. Where are you calling from? And then I said, it's me. So that was encouraging in a very simple way, but that's what they need to do, because once you part with the money, you're not going to get it back. These individuals, certainly if it's a scam or family members, they spend the money.
Right.
They have gambling problems, they have drug problems, they have spendthrift problems. So there has to be justice if we can make a case, and the people have to be punished if we can do it, but that's still not going to take away from the inner psychological turmoil that's caused by this outrageous behavior.
I can understand where a parent, an elderly parent or a grandparent, doesn't want to say anything because they don't want to get their loved ones in trouble. How do you deal with that? Let's say a neighbor says, I think that this is happening, but I've mentioned it to him or her, and he says, no, he's going to get in trouble, it's going to get on his record, he's going to do this, How do you work through that?
It is difficult. My sympathy is with the individual because they love the person, that they don't want to get them involved in the criminal justice system. However, you have a right to, within reason, live a normal life. And if people who you love and part of your life are stealing money from you and really attempting to at least ruin your financial well-being at a point in time where it's critical, you should not stand for that. you really don't need to be concerned what's going to happen to them. While you can be, the focus should be on you. If you have a family member who's addicted to drugs, that doesn't give them a right to take thousands of dollars from you, to manipulate you and steal from you. What happens to them, you have to have faith that the system will handle it appropriately. But you shouldn't just stand by and say, I can't do it, I'm going to let them do it or her do it, because it's just going to continue. So it is a difficult dynamic. There's a shame aspect to it and a trust violation, but my goal is in a nice way to try to at least say to people, you don't have to be abused like this. Have some respect for your status. Yes, if it's someone breaking trust, still, you need to bring it to someone's attention because it's just going to continue until you are potentially out of assets. We had a case recently in southeastern Massachusetts where we charged someone who was a grandson who was stealing from the grandmother, allegedly making false phone calls, about $40,000. Person ends up in North Carolina. I said, go get him. And she was finally upset about this, but we just can't stand by and see that happen if it is brought to our attention and we have a criminal basis to go forward. Because even though there may be a moral aspect to this, if you are willfully giving me money, it may not be right, but there's nothing we can do about that. But you're dealing with people with dementia, limited mental faculties sometimes, who are more susceptible to being victimized. The family member can act like if they have a power of attorney, I have authority to take all this money. Well, you may have authority to pay bills, you have authority to take $25,000 and spend it on yourself over the last year or two. No is the answer. So it's complicated, it can be tricky at times, but the end result is I'm not going to sit by and watch this abuse go on without attempting to do something about it. We have charged several cases already. Again, it's not easy because you have issues, as I said, of dementia, of is there a crime, was there the consent in giving the money? But I think the issue is important enough, and it's only going to increase given people's increased life expectancy, which is great, but it just makes them more vulnerable. Vulnerable victims like the elderly, like children, like women in these domestic violence situations are priorities to me, and I am making a stand against these crimes that are committed against them.
That is great. That is great. What about people in nursing homes? I have heard more and more about them being abused. You know, what happens when you hear something like that, or it comes to the attention, let's say, of your office? Would it go to your office?
It's a very good question. Depends what the abuse is, because we do have to somewhat have a narrow focus. Are they being maltreated by way of care? Certainly, if someone is abusing someone, that's a criminal matter. They have a duty to report that. I've seen situations, I'm very upset by one, it's a pending case, but an allegation of in a facility, a temporary individual took the rings off of a woman's hands, which I find is despicable. So you have those type of things. That would probably be reported to us. There's no question there are issues there, but the nursing homes are under their own guidelines. They have a duty to care for these patients and provide appropriate care. So we hope that goes on. If it's brought to our attention and it's a criminal matter, we will react to it. Ironically, about 6 years ago in southeast Massachusetts, there was a alleged murder of an elderly person, by an elderly person, which was unique and shocking. Now that's an extreme, obviously, but the day-to-day more normal crimes of stealing or abuse, if they're brought to our attention, we will prosecute them.
It's good to know. Now, if someone feels that there is an abuse case going on, whether physical or financial, do they go to the police? Do they go to their COA? Do they call your office directly?
Well, I think there are different options. We want to have some structure in the reporting. certainly we can field a call. But I think the first, it depends what it is. If it's suspicion, it might not be bad to bring that to the attention of the Council on Aging. There's also Bristol Elder Services, who has a lot of interaction with many clients, and some of these improprieties, if you will, are generated by them. Then they can be investigated. They could go to the police department if it's a crime. There's a reason to believe there's a crime. I mean, just saying I think something's going on is a little more difficult because we don't. That's a rather vague complaint, and the police may not be able to investigate it. But I think there's several options, but I think if someone it's happening to them, they can start with their local council on aging. If it's very clear, police, and then we ultimately would get involved in it. If they felt like they wanted to call our office, we could at least analyze it and put them in the right direction. So there's several options, but again, it depends probably more what's going on. Mere suspicion may not be enough, but Bristol Elder Services has an investigative unit that we have been working more and more with the last 4 or 5 months.
That's great to know. Well, thank you for taking this initiative as far as elder abuse is concerned. I know it's a growing thing across the country, and I think if we can be proactive about it, as you are being in your office, that we can possibly prevent this from growing and becoming bigger in our communities.
Well, very well said. Those are my thoughts, and that is the goal, to engage more people, make them aware, and try to make a difference. We'll prosecute who we have to prosecute, but it's more than that, because the best thing is someone doesn't give the $2,000 for the grandmother, or give money to the IRS, or get swindled by a contractor because they don't have someone to talk to. So I'm here for them. I want to make a difference with this. I believe we are. We're going to continue to move forward with this initiative.
Great. I hope you come back someday and talk about some of the other initiatives you have in your office.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us today on the Learning Curve. I hope to have you come back next time.